I think we're going to get started. And as people trickle in, we'll just catch them up to speed. So thank you for joining. Sorry, one second. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Diversity and Women in Tech event. My name is Marcus Webb, and I'm the Economic Inclusion Fellow here at Center State CEO, and I'll be moderating tonight's event. Before we get started, I wanted to say thank you to our sponsor, JP Morgan Chase, for sponsoring this event. They sponsor all of the tech and culture work that we're doing, and they make it a reality for us to bring these innovative events to life and really, help us try to diversify the tech industry here in Central New York. So once again, thank you to JP Morgan Chase for sponsoring this event. I also want to go over some quick housekeeping rules before we get started. All participants will be muted upon entry. Please do not come off mute until we open up the floor for questions towards the end of the event. The session will also be recorded. It's actually being recorded right now and made public on the Center State CEO website and also on the Generation Next Facebook page. And the chat will be open for comments and questions, but we won't really answer any of those questions until the end of the event when we open up the floor. And that's when you can ask Jamie any questions that you may have. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Jamie Sternlicht and really read her amazing bio to you. Jamie Sternlicht is a transplant to Central New York. She is the Director of Technology, Data, and Policy at the Elvina Group, a technology consulting company based in Syracuse. Jamie began her career in technology as a mechanical and aerospace engineer, transitioning from aerospace into robotics, and eventually bringing her talents to Washington, D.C. In D.C., she worked in the U.S. Senate to translate data and technology to policymakers. With the Elvina Group, Jamie is working on data-driven solutions with the eye towards building more inclusive, healthier, and happier communities. The Elvina Group is a New York State and federally certified WBE with the mission to collaborate with the best people and leverage the best of technology to solve strategic challenges with other like-minded organizations. You have a lot of stuff in there, Jamie, doing a lot of amazing things. Did you want to say anything to the audience before we get started?
Not much. I'm just excited to be here. Thanks for having me, and I'm happy to kick it off.
Okay. Hello, everyone. How's it going? People who just jumped in, we're just now getting started. Thank you for joining. So Jamie, you have a lot of amazing things, as I just said. People don't just wake up every day and say, I want to become a mechanical engineer or aerospace engineer. So I really wanted to ask, what sparked your interest in technology?
So I have always known that I'm pretty good at math. My dad, for whatever reason, gave me math problems instead of bedtime stories. But really, like, what sparked my interest in technology was a science project when I was like in 5th or 6th grade. That's like 1999, 2000. And that was just about the time that the Prius hybrid was becoming popularized. My dad's a car dealer. And so I asked him what he thought I should do my science project on. And he said, why not the Prius? And so I did this whole project. I remember having a trifold presentation about the Prius and the hybrid technology and how new it was and innovative and how great it would be for the environment. And that was really like my first perspective into how innovation could have just a huge impact on how people lived and the environment at large and by proxy people. So
okay, interesting story, definitely. So I'm doing a lot of work around community engagement and really trying to help diversify the tech industry here in Central New York. I don't really know a lot about technology. I'm still learning about it. But I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about diversity in tech-related fields? Do you feel like diversity is important? And if so, why?
Yes, of course. I mean, diversity is important no matter the field. And I mean, tech is of course included in that. When any sector isn't diverse, it's missing out. It's missing out on talent. It's missing out on a diversity of ideas, a diversity of experiences, and especially as far as innovation, when you don't have these diverse perspectives, you just miss out. So it's incredibly important.
Okay, definitely agree. I briefly mentioned where you currently work, the Elvina Group, but for the audience who may not know much about the Elvina Group, can you explain a little bit to us about what exactly the Elvina Group is?
Yeah. So we're a technology consulting group. We focus on how to integrate technology and data into solutions for a variety of organizations. So not just tech companies, but for municipalities, for nonprofits. Back to what you said, Marcus, we're a New York State and federally certified WBE. And so, so we do all these projects with a bunch of different companies and organizations. But in addition, we also are working on creating and innovating in-house. So we've developed an application which utilizes publicly available data to create feasibility studies for developers. And we're also looking into using that public data for other applications like healthcare, and however else we can use it.
Okay. What is your role as the Director of Technology and Data and Policy with the Elvina Group?
Yeah, we're a small shop, so I play a lot of roles. But so I work on projects from ideation to execution. So responsible for bringing in new clients, leading the projects, and in general, bringing a tech and policy perspective to all that we do, and in particular to Central New York. When I moved back to Central New York last year, I knew that I wanted to continue working on the cusp, on the intersection of technology and policy. And Syracuse is a really exciting place for that, particularly with the Mayor's Surge Initiative. It was great to see you last week, Marcus, on the Surge Summit.
Thank you. Thank you.
Virtual summit. Yeah. Prior to my experience with the Elvina Group and as well as in the Elvina Group, I've been heavily involved in smart city initiatives and understanding how cities and other cities outside of Syracuse are approaching smart city initiatives strategically. And it's particularly interesting as a technologist because you ask people what they think a smart city is, and you ask 50 people, you get 50 different answers.
Right.
Variety of things,
Okay.
always new and exciting.
I want to backtrack a little bit. Where exactly are you from, Jamie?
Yeah, I am originally from Long Island,
Okay.
New York, but I came upstate for university, went back to Long Island for work, and then, well, prior to that, while in college, I met my now husband, and his family's from up here, outside of Syracuse, and so now I'm back here and enjoying upstate living.
So people typically think, there's no opportunity in Central New York or in Syracuse. Other than, your husband family being here, what made you want to come back to Syracuse and start a career, specifically in tech?
Yeah. It was, well, when did I graduate from college? In 2014, I finished my master's. And it did feel a little like, what is there even for me to do up in Syracuse? But then a couple of years ago, the Surge Initiative was announced. And that was partly while I was working in DC, and I started to learn more about it. And so this focus on bringing technologists up here, plus the combination of, I love upstate New York. I love the variety that you can get up here, whether, going to the Adirondacks or going to the Finger Lakes, or it's really just a lifestyle that I really enjoy. Particularly, I live on a farm, so I really love it. Yeah.
Okay.
And plus the city, of course. It's always nice to have access to a city,
right,
and where you have just such an amazing community.
Right. So I wanted to go back to some of your past experiences. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like being a mechanical and aerospace engineer? This is very interesting.
Yeah. So I graduated with my bachelor's in mechanical and aerospace engineering. And while I was doing my bachelor's, I worked for a company out in Palo Alto for about a year, almost a year, that manufactured satellites. So it was a company called Space Systems L'Oreal. And I was a mechanical designer for them, which is fascinating, especially on satellites, because every ounce of weight is important when you're launching something into space. So that was really fascinating work, and really cool to be able to say that something I worked on is in space. And then after my bachelor's, I also did my master's in mechanical and aerospace engineering. But this time I did a focus on robotics and autonomous systems. So when I graduated, I worked for a company called ULC Robotics. For them, I was initially a mechanical designer, and I eventually moved on to project management. So we built systems for the utility industry, so semi-autonomous systems, whether they were crawlers that went into gas mains, or drones that did inspections for electric utilities. We worked across the spectrum. And it was just really great in terms of, I got to also work with incredibly intelligent people, whether they were software engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers. And then on top of that, the people who actually were on the ground working. So the utilities, contractors, and the guys who are actually digging the holes and doing the day-to-day work. So communicating between the customer and our engineers was fascinating work.
Okay. As I mentioned in your bio, you worked with the U.S. Senate. Can you tell us a little bit more about your role working with the Senate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's see. So like I mentioned, I was working with a bunch of different types of engineers, and I knew I was looking for a change. I loved what I was doing. I loved the people I was working with, but I don't know, something about me is just always excited for what's next. And I thought that I was going to go into software, but I saw this opportunity for a fellowship called Tech Congress. And Tech Congress is a one-year program that brings technologists to Capitol Hill, to congressional offices, to provide technological expertise across a variety of subjects. And then in the meantime, or prior to to launching us and sending us out to the wolves on Capitol Hill. They put us through a little boot camp as far as learning about policy and learning about how things get done on the Hill. So I went through that boot camp with them. Well, I went through the interviews and was eventually selected for this fellowship, then went through this small boot camp where after we were done with it, since our salaries were provided through the fellowship, and because most little known fact about congressional offices, they're all super underfunded. So getting any sort of technological expertise in-house in an office on the Hill is really desired. So so I was able to kind of have my pick of which office I wanted to go and work for. And for me, it was extremely important to me that I stayed with New York, and since born and raised in New York, and so I landed on Senator Gillibrand's office. She's someone who I find incredibly inspiring, and it really was an amazing experience working for her and her team. So yeah, I went in there thinking I was going to be working on more like tech focused. There are a lot of offices that focused on, interrogating Facebook and Google and about their practices, and as well as, data breaches, and which is all super fascinating to me, but I'm a mechanical engineer, not a software engineer. And so to me, it wasn't, that isn't really my area of expertise. But I ended up finding kind of my niche with her economic development director, and more focusing on entrepreneurship and innovation and how we encourage that in our communities. So I ended up, and in particular, I ended up being fascinated by her initiative around, it's called Build Local, Hire Local, was her bill that she submitted in Congress, and that I helped write, which is pretty cool.
Quick flex.
Yeah, I'm like, ooh. It was focused around I-81 and the incredible devastation that that interstates like I-81 and across the United States created by essentially plowing through minority communities, and well-established communities. In Syracuse, 81 went through the 15th Ward, and really devastated things. So her Build Local, Hire Local is around that. So much of this infrastructure is crumbling anyway, and when we rebuild it, or if we rebuild it, we really need to have a focus on the local community that it is impacting. And so part of that is looking at workforce development and how you can involve the community in rebuilding. And so that was just really fascinating to me, and what ended up bringing me to meeting you amazing people at Center State CEO.
Amazing. With doing all of this kind of, big, amazing work, was there ever a sense of intimidation or?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Fortunately, fortunately, the staff I was working for was very, they were very open and accepting, and they understood how kind of daunting, because they've all been through it before too, how daunting some of this stuff can be. Yeah, but yeah, I'm as far as working in the Senate, I mean, that was nowhere near as daunting as, going into my first few days of working for a robotics company.
Right.
So, especially because, so it was something I could write off as, well, I'm an engineer, I'm not a policy expert. So,
Right.
but yeah.
What would you say were your biggest challenges to achieving the success that you have today?
Yeah. Man, I mean, this might sound a little silly, but actually, probably my finishing my bachelor's was probably one of the biggest challenges for me. I remember being in my sophomore year and more or less wanting to quit, and more or less having, my advisor telling me that, that I was involved in a lot of stuff in college. I was a resident advisor, which, paid for my room and board. I was a rock climbing instructor. So I had a lot of side hustles, and I had an advisor who told me, essentially, oh, well, if you're having such a hard time, then why don't you quit your job as a resident advisor? And it was just such a, I look back at that now and I'm glad that I didn't listen to them. Later on, I interviewed with GE, and they asked me, well, if why should we hire you, someone who doesn't have a 4.0 GPA, whereas the last person who was in here had a 4.0 GPA? Why should we hire you? And I had explained to them all of the stuff that I was doing, and they ended up hiring me.
Of course.
Yeah, so and especially universities, I think in the US, have a tendency to have their freshmen weed out courses, and so I think that can be really challenging, and I think that's really devastating to our talent pools, that we discourage essentially kids, right, like 18-year-olds from trying to pursue what they're interested in just because they couldn't get through what was it for me? I don't even, linear algebra, or it's just yeah,
it's crazy. I wanted to go back again. I know you mentioned earlier about robotics, but I want to hear a little bit more. What exactly was your role in robotics? What exactly were you doing?
Yeah. Well, so I started out as a mechanical designer. So I was helping, just essentially design parts for the robotic systems. So, in particular, we were working on systems that went into gas mains. So super important, we would do live launches into gas mains. So the gas mains are still on. And so that's to prevent outages to customers. But that can also be very dangerous. So you have to be very careful with how you're designing the systems. You really don't want to be creating any sparks, right? So, and later on, I moved on to becoming a project manager, where I essentially, and this is coming back to actually what Glenn was saying on the chat, that where being a project manager, I didn't just need to know, the hard skills of mechanical engineering. I had to learn not just learn, but you have to really be able to talk to people, right? You have to understand what the the customer wants and what they need, because the customer might think what they know what they want, when in reality, like, what they want might not necessarily be technologically feasible, or maybe you have to do it in a different way. So taking their requirements for what they need done, and then being able to translate it to our engineers to understand whether it's possible. So working across not just the mechanical designers to understand what is mechanically feasible, but also the electrical engineers to understand, like, how small can you get the electrical components? What sort of functionality can you get out of electrical components that small? And then on top of it, like, the software application, like, can we autonomize the data collection? Can we go into a pipe and take consistent readings against the pipe to understand the thickness of the wall? Or can we inject some material into the joint gap in order to reseal the joints, because these pipes that we were working on are in New York City are 200 years old. So, yeah.
So, people on this call may be hearing all of this amazing stuff that you're doing, and that you have done, and just think, is it too late for me to, maybe get into the tech industry or do what Jamie is doing? Do you think it is too late for anyone to actually jump into tech and do some of this amazing work?
No,
Never
it's
too
never
late,
too late. Definitely not. Gosh. And, part of me almost wishes that I came into it later, but I mean, I am very glad and grateful for all the experiences that I've had. But yeah, like, understanding, being able to understand from a more adult perspective around what engineers do, and how it's not only sitting in front of a computer all day, although these days it might feel a little bit like that. But you can be working in the field. I have friends back at my old company who are scaling wind turbines right now, and who are out in the streets of Brooklyn deploying robotic systems. And there's just a variety of options for everyone to enter into tech. Like, tech is everything, right? Like, I mean, at least these days, it's everything. And there's something out there for everyone. And then on top of it, you usually get paid pretty well. So, yeah. I think it's something anyone can move into.
Okay, that's great advice. One last question. What advice would you have for others who want to set off in a similar path as you, similar direction? It's kind of like the same question, but it's a little more in depth.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and touching back on what I was saying, what around, like, don't get discouraged. There have been so many times where I felt like I didn't belong, and it can be tough, but it's worth it. And I mean, it's also worth it to prove people wrong. So, but it's worth it in that, it's a really exciting area to be in, and it might be hard getting there, but it's worth it.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. At this point, I wanted to open up the floor for anyone who may have questions for Jamie based on what she just presented. So you can drop any question that you may have in the chat, and I'll read it to her, or you can come off mute and have a conversation with her. So Floor is open.
Yeah, or turn on your cameras and say hello. Marcus, how did you end up going for, because you're a fellow, right?
Yep. How did I end up?
What, yeah.
So
finding the fellowship and.
So I actually did an internship with Center State over the summer of 2019, right before I graduated from SU. And the internship was through On Point for College. And, you know, I made a lot of great connections here at Center State, met a lot of amazing people. Kara's on the call. I believe Liza is somewhere on the call, Jessica. It's a lot of amazing people. And I just was granted the opportunity to come back for a fellowship opportunity. Cal reached out to me and let me know that there was a spot open and I should apply for it. And I applied and I got in and I love it. Met so many people like yourself, Kristen, and everyone. So definitely happy to be here.
Oh. So happy that I, got the opportunity to meet you.
Definitely, vice versa. I'm happy you're here. All right, we have a question. BKK, what's your advice to get started in tech if we are currently in another industry?
I guess I think the the biggest part there, right, is like what is tech, right? So for me, the most important part there is to analyze what you're interested in regards to tech. Where are you coming from? Are you an accountant and you've been working in Excel and you've been really interested in creating these macros in Excel, and you'd like to be able to analyze data more thoroughly? So maybe you want to explore Python, a programming language, to be able to analyze data more comprehensively, or maybe you want to learn R. Or are you a contractor and you've been building things like your whole life, and you're really interested in getting more hands-on and working with a mill and a lathe or welding? Like what about tech do you like? And I would go from there, whether it's taking a programming course or taking a welding course at BOCES, or there's a variety of paths you can take in tech.
Thank you, Jamie. I have another question. Glenn, I believe I skipped you the first time going back. What is your favorite, Jamie, this is to you, what is your favorite role? Mechanical engineering, management, government? Glenn, can you clarify that question a little bit better, please?
Favorite activity? Man, I mean, it's such a combination of all of it, which yeah, which is like what brought me to the Alvina group, that I really enjoyed pieces of all of it. I loved, as a mechanical design engineer, I loved creating physical components to build and being able to see like the output of my work. But I also loved the communication with people and collaboration of creating solutions and project management. The part about government that I didn't like as much is that it's a lot less tangible to understand what your impact is and what you've created. And part of that, I think, is because I was working on a federal level. But I did really enjoy the idea of bringing more people into tech roles. And so that's kind of what brought me, when I came back to Syracuse, I knew I wanted to focus more locally. So it's a little bit of everything, and that's why I appreciate the Alvina Group so much, and this role of consultant, and that we're getting to kind of pave our own path, and then also help local organizations with what they're doing, and I can do a little bit of it all.
Thank you, Jamie. That was a great question, Glenn.
Yeah.
So Kristen, this is from Kristen. Can you summarize the categories of engineers you see in the industry, and what are some key differences between them?
Ooh. Which industry? Well, I'm gonna take it as if just kind of talking about tech more broadly.
She said engineers. I don't know if I skipped that. Can you summarize the categories?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, mechanical versus electrical versus software. I mean, yeah, those are, I would say, three of the bigger categories. I mean, then you also start to delve into biological engineering and environmental engineering, and they all kind of have their own facets, right? I mean, key differences, I would say, like mechanical engineering is a little bit more, physically based, physical design. Electrical, although, physical design, but needing to know, the in-depth physical concepts of like nanostructures and, or, the larger, if you go into civil engineering, the more larger physical aspects of that. And then, electrical, thinking of the electrical components in your computer. So the hardware of your computer, and how signals are being sent, or computer or robotic system, or name your electrical equipment. Thanks, Kat. Hi, Kat. And then software engineers, essentially designing the software for how it's making, giving a computer commands in order for how it should be processing. Yeah. That answer your question, Kristen?
Yes, thank you.
All right, we have another question from Kara. Where are some of your favorite sources to get info about what's new and exciting in the tech industry?
Ooh.
Good question, Kara.
Yeah. I'm like, of course I got to put a plug in for the Tech Garden newsletter. Stay local, right? So Tech Garden newsletter. God, I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but there's a Politico, like technologists newsletter, but that I used to follow a lot more closely. And then I'm like, I guess anyone could probably join this, but I used to be a part of the like Tech Ladies newsletter, which I found was a really great community.
We have another question from Glenn. What's next? What do you want to be doing in a few years down the road?
Ooh, boy. Well, like I mentioned, I'm really, grateful for working with my partner, Kristen, at the Alvina Group. And, we really want to be, creating creating solutions and innovating around, making people's lives better. And so whether that is this, like using public data to inform healthcare decisions, or just, essentially how can we continue to help our community and use tech to do it.
These are great questions. Keep them coming.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your questions, Glenn and Kira. I really appreciate it. And Kristen, of course. And Kat was, I'm like, I don't know if she's still on here, but she worked with me over at Space Systems L'Oreal all the way back when, and she was really one of my big inspirations. Hi, Kat. Around, she also was a mechanical, well, she was far more advanced than I was as a mechanical designer, and really, helped me, talk me through, entering into the space and giving me kind of a path forward and understanding what things could look like. So thank you, Kat.
All right, we have another question. Where do you see the future of the technology industry in Syracuse?
Ooh. I'm like, I really, I don't know, I have a, I'm like, I really like the phrase that that they use for the Syracuse surge, which is what is it? The oh God, of course now I'm blanking. The an inclusive new economy, like for an inclusive new economy, and ooh, more questions. So I see a lot of future around, more companies coming in, and that can be a variety of companies. The UAV industry here has really hit it off. And then on top of that, the Tech Garden has a bunch of interesting high growth startups going around on there. So I think, there's a place for everyone in the technology community here in Syracuse.
So Glenn says this is a tough one. What kind of challenges have you faced in your career? Ever been mansplained to? I don't know if I pronounced that right.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And how did you handle it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a daunting and interesting. I was hired onto the robotics company at the same time as the only other female engineer. So they brought on 2 female engineers at the same time. But we were on separate teams. So most often I was in a room full of men, and mainly, white men. And there was more than a few times where things were mansplained to me, or where I would pitch an idea and have it be ignored, only to have a guy in the room say the same thing 2 minutes later. luckily I had some pretty good allies who would be like, yeah, Jamie said that 5 minutes ago. So that was super lucky. But I mean, they weren't always there. And so often I had to just push through, which is not, I don't, it's not, that's not, I hope not, I hope other people don't have to go through that, but yeah, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Glenn, that was a great question. What we're actually trying to do with this event series is really highlight the unique experience that women have in tech. So that definitely was a great question to ask, and Jamie, you answered that very well. I have time for about 2 more questions. So BKK, with the pandemic placing an emphasis on remote working, how might that shape the future of careers as a whole, specifically in tech as well?
Man, yeah, I don't know. I've been meaning, I've reached out to a couple of my coworkers at the robotics company, asking them, about their experiences. A lot of them are mainly remote now. And I think and actually I had requested at one point to go to go 2 or 3 days a week entirely remote, while I was working at that robotics company. And if they had allowed me to do that, there might have been a possibility that would have stayed with them longer. So I think it's going to be a really interesting, opening the fields, and making things a little bit more accessible to a whole different subsets of people. Yeah, I'd be really curious, actually. I'm like, if Kat is still on here, I'm curious about how her position has changed given the pandemic. I haven't talked to her for a while.
Let's hear it, Kat.
We might have lost her, but yeah, I find it really interesting, especially particularly with physical devices. People at Facebook can be working remote. That's not a problem, right? But at the robotics company, at least a few of them still have to be going in every once in a while, because there is a mechanical device that you need to have your hands on and need to be testing. So I always find those differences really interesting in terms of the remote work and how whether or not what industry you're in can affect how easily you can go remote.
We have time for about 1 more question if anyone has any last minute thoughts. I get to everything.
Thanks everyone for all these amazing questions and for coming.
Do you have anything else you wanted to share, Jamie?
I guess I should share, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, or Facebook or Instagram, whatever venue you want to reach me at. I also, I live on a farm, and so I have a farm Instagram, so it's CNY Farm. But yeah, particularly if you're interested in tech and you're thinking about making a move, please reach out, say hello, and I'd really like to figure out how we can get you over to the dark side.
What are you guys farming? That's from Glenn.
Variety of things. So we, my husband's a dairy farmer, but we also just have been breaking into sheep. So we have a flock of about 50 sheep. Plus we keep bees, as well as we have ducks and chickens, variety of animals, and they're all amazing. So check out the Instagram.
Okay, I just dropped a link in the chat for a survey that we would truly appreciate if everyone would take the time to fill out. I also will follow up with an email with a survey link so you can take it at your own pace. It's really just to give us a better understanding of, you know, what you guys are getting out of these events, and really try to help us build out this tech and culture network. So it's not like, you know, you all are just coming to the event, but you're actually a part of this network. So your feedback is very important to us. So when you get a chance, please just copy that link and take the survey. And like I said, I'll send out another email. And let me just share my screen really quick. Try to get to the end. Thank you all for coming to this event. And, you know, thank you, Jamie, for presenting all of your experiences. It was definitely a joy to have you. We truly appreciate you. If you need any resources, you can refer to the Center State CEO website and learn more about all of our upcoming events. And if you want to engage with us, you can follow us on Generation Next on Facebook and Gen Next 315 on Instagram. And also, if you have any questions about getting involved with tech and culture, you can reach out to us at generationnext@centerstateceo.com. Again, thank you, Jamie. This has been amazing. Appreciate you for you know, supporting this event.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Gary and Craig, did you have any questions? How's it going, Craig?